The rancher thought the Apache woman wanted water, but she asked him to teach her to use her hands. The sun was high in the sky, burning down on the dry land of the southwest. The air shimmered with heat, and the dusty wind carried the smell of dry grass and earth. On the edge of the ranch, a man moved slowly, checking the fences and making sure the cattle were calm. He was a rancher, strong from years of work, with hands calloused and rough from holding ropes and tools every day. He had lived on this land for most of his life, knowing every rock, every tree, and every animal. The ranch was his world, a place of hard work and quiet peace. That afternoon, as he was walking along the edge of the property, he saw something unusual. A woman was moving across the distant dry field. She walked with care, as if she were used to being alone in the wilderness. Her dark hair fell around her shoulders, and she carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Her clothing was simple but neat, and there was a calm strength in the way she walked. The rancher watched her closely. He had seen travelers before, sometimes lost, sometimes looking for work, sometimes seeking shelter from the sun. But there was something different about this woman. She moved with purpose, yet she seemed careful not to disturb the land around her. As she came closer, he saw that she was tired. Her steps slowed and she wiped sweat from her brow. Without thinking, he went to meet her. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Do you need water?" He reached for a small canteen he always carried for the workers, thinking she might be thirsty from walking under the hot sun. The woman stopped a few steps away. She looked at him quietly, and for a moment he thought she would just take the water and move on. But then she said something that surprised him. "I do not need water," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. "I want something else. I want you to teach me to use my hands." He blinked. His mind tried to catch up. "To use your hands?" he asked. "What do you mean?" He had lived his life on this land, teaching young boys to ride, showing workers how to care for animals, and fixing fences and tools himself. But no one had ever asked him this question before. Usually people needed food or water or a place to rest, not a lesson in working with their hands. She nodded, her dark eyes steady. "I want to learn," she said simply. "I want to make things. I want to build. I want to care for the land and the animals like you do." There was no pride in her voice, no demand, only a quiet determination. The rancher felt something shift in his chest. He had lived a life of routine, but this request, it was unusual, it was honest, it was sincere. He hesitated for a moment. Teaching someone like this would take time. It would mean slowing down his own work and showing patience he did not usually spend on strangers. But there was something about her that made him nod slowly. "All right," he said finally. "I can show you. But it will not be easy. Working with your hands takes strength and patience." She smiled, a small but bright smile that reached her eyes. "I am ready," she said, and just like that the first lesson began. He started with the simplest tasks, the things any new worker needed to know. "First," he said, "you learn to understand the land. Every tree, every stone, every hill matters. You have to know what is around you before you touch it." He showed her how to walk carefully, noticing the ground beneath their feet, the direction of the wind, and how the cattle moved in response to sound and movement. At first she followed slowly, her eyes wide and attentive, but she did not stumble, she did not complain. She simply watched and learned. Next he took her to the fence line. "A fence is not just wood and wire," he said. "It is protection. It keeps animals safe. It keeps the land in order. You have to build it strong." He handed her a hammer and nails, and her fingers touched them cautiously. He showed her how to hold the hammer, how to strike the nails straight, and how to watch her movements carefully. Her first attempts were shaky. The nails bent, the hammer slipped. Her hands got small cuts and blisters. She frowned, not with frustration but with concentration. She looked at her hands, then back at him, and tried again. "It is not about strength," she said after a while. "It is about attention." "I can feel it." The rancher smiled. She was right. Using your hands was not just about force. It was about care, control, and thought. As the afternoon passed, they worked together. He showed her how to repair a broken fence post, how to carry buckets of water without spilling, and how to guide the cattle without scaring them. She watched carefully and copied his movements. Sometimes she made mistakes, but she always tried again. And slowly she began to move with confidence, her hands learning the rhythm of the work. By the end of the day, the sun was low in the sky, painting the land with gold and orange. The rancher and the woman sat on a large rock, looking over the ranch. She had done her best, and he could see the progress in her hands, in the way she carried herself, in the small but steady confidence that had grown. "You learn fast," he said, almost surprised at himself. "Most people take months to do what you did in a day." She only smiled, quiet and calm. "I want to learn," she said simply, "and I want to do it well." The rancher realized that teaching her would be more than just showing her how to fix fences or carry buckets. It would be about patience, trust, and understanding. He had never taught a woman before, never someone so determined and so observant. There was something special about her, something that made him pay attention in a new way, not just to the work, but to the person learning it. That night, as he lit the lantern in the small ranch house, he thought about the day. He remembered how she had looked at the land, how she had handled the hammer, how she had listened and tried again when she failed. He realized that this was more than just work. This was learning, this was connection, this was respect, quietly growing between them. He did not know what would happen tomorrow or the next day or the next week. He did not know if she would stay long or move on. But he knew one thing. She had asked for something real, something honest, and he could not turn her away. He had learned many things in his life, but teaching someone to use their hands, teaching someone to see the land, to understand it, and to care for it, was a new lesson for him too. And so, as the stars appeared over the desert sky and the night wind whispered through the trees, the rancher and the woman rested. Tomorrow, the work would continue. More fences would need fixing. The cattle would need tending. But the first day had been enough to start a journey that neither of them could yet imagine. In that quiet, golden light, both of them understood something unspoken. Hands could build more than fences. Hands could build trust. Hands could build understanding. Hands could build a life. And sometimes, the person who asked the question you least expected could teach you as much as you taught them. The woman lay under a blanket near the fire, looking at her hands. They were small but already marked with tiny scratches and evidence of work. She traced the lines of her palms slowly, feeling a sense of pride she had not felt before. She did not yet know all that she could do with these hands, but she knew this. She could learn. She could try. She could grow. And the rancher, looking at her quietly from the corner of the firelight, thought about how strange life could be. A simple request had opened the door to something he had never expected. He had offered water at first, thinking it was what she needed. But what she had asked for, what she truly wanted, was something deeper. She wanted knowledge. She wanted skill. She wanted to shape her hands into tools of life, not just survival. And he quietly felt honored to help her begin that journey. As the night deepened and the fire burned low, both of them drifted into sleep, the desert stretching endlessly around them. The stars overhead seemed to shine a little brighter, as if recognizing the beginning of something rare and meaningful. The rancher would wake in the morning, ready to continue teaching. The woman would wake, ready to learn. And the land around them, vast and quiet, would witness the first steps of a partnership built not on words alone, but on effort, respect, and the work of hands that could shape the world. The next morning, the ranch woke slowly under the pale light of dawn. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of earth and dew. The rancher was already awake, walking the paths he had learned by heart over years of work. He thought about the woman who had arrived the day before. She had asked something unusual, something beyond mere survival. She wanted to learn to use her hands. Teaching her would take time, patience, and effort, but he had decided it was worth it. There was something rare about her determination, something that made him respect her even before she had done much at all. He found her sitting outside near the water trough, her hands carefully washing the small cuts and scrapes from the previous day. She looked calm, almost serene, but there was a quiet fire in her eyes. When she saw him approach, she stood straight, brushing the dust from her simple clothing. "Good morning," she said softly. "I am ready to continue." The rancher nodded. "Good. Today we will start with the tools. You need to understand them before you can use them well." He led her to the small shed where the tools were kept. Inside, rows of hammers, saws, ropes, and pliers hung neatly on the walls. There were shovels leaning in the corner and buckets stacked carefully. Everything had its place, and everything was in order. The rancher believed that understanding the tools and respecting them was as important as knowing how to use them. He picked up a hammer and handed it to her. "First, you need to hold it properly. Don't grip it too tightly or you will tire your hand. Don't hold it too loosely or it will slip. Watch me first, then try." He demonstrated slowly, driving a nail straight into a wooden board. The sound was crisp and satisfying. He stepped back and gestured for her to try. She took the hammer, her fingers wrapping carefully around the handle. At first her movements were awkward. The hammer slipped once, missing the nail entirely. She frowned, frustrated for a moment, but then she straightened, adjusted her grip, and tried again. This time the nail went in at an angle. Not perfect, but progress. The rancher nodded approvingly. "Better. It is not about speed. It is about attention, control, and practice." They spent the morning in the shed working together. He showed her how to use different tools: pliers for bending wire, saws for cutting wood, and ropes for tying bundles. She listened carefully, copied his movements, and learned quickly. Sometimes she made mistakes. Sometimes a nail bent, a saw slipped, or a rope tangled, but she never gave up. Each mistake was met with quiet focus, not frustration. The rancher began to see something remarkable. She had patience, a skill rarer than strength in the hands of many men he had taught. By midday, they took a break. The sun was high, and the heat made the ranch seem even larger and wilder. They sat on a fallen log near the cattle pen, drinking water and eating simple bread he had brought. The woman watched the animals closely, noticing their movements and behavior. "You watch them closely," he said. "That is good. You need to understand the animals, not just the land or the tools. They have habits. They have moods. You must learn to read them." "I am learning," she said quietly, her eyes following a small calf that had wandered near the fence. She reached out, not to touch it yet, but to understand its movements. The rancher smiled slightly. She was observing, thinking, and learning on her own. That was the sign of someone who would succeed, someone who would not just copy his actions but eventually understand and adapt them. After lunch, they moved to the fields. The rancher wanted her to practice working in the open land, not just in the shed. He showed her how to carry a bucket of water without spilling it, how to move quietly near the animals, and how to mend small fences. Her movements became smoother with each task, her confidence growing. She was learning not just with her hands but with her mind, thinking about each step, predicting each outcome, and adjusting her actions carefully. In the afternoon, a small challenge arose. One of the younger cattle had wandered too close to a weak fence. The rancher pointed it out, and without hesitation, the woman stepped forward. She picked up the rope and guided the calf back gently, speaking softly to calm it. Her movements were careful but sure. The rancher watched silently, impressed. She had learned not just from words, but from watching, listening, and trying. She was learning quickly how to handle not just tools, but life on the ranch. As they worked, she asked questions about everything. How to know which wood was strong enough for the fence, how to care for a horse that was stubborn or scared, how to recognize changes in the weather before a storm. He answered patiently, explaining the small details that made life on the ranch possible. Sometimes he would tell her a story of a mistake he had made years ago and how he had learned from it. She listened intently, absorbing the lessons not just from success, but from failure. By the time the sun began to lower in the sky, they were both tired. Their hands were scratched, their clothes dusty, and sweat marked their faces. But there was a sense of accomplishment. The rancher had seen her progress in a single day, and she had felt the satisfaction of learning something real, something useful. She no longer moved as a stranger in a strange land. She moved with purpose, with understanding, and with growing skill. As they walked back toward the ranch house, the woman paused to look at the fields, the fences, and the cattle. "It is not easy," she said softly. "But I can feel the difference when I do it right." The rancher nodded. "That is because you pay attention. Strength comes later, but attention and care come first. Your hands can only do what your mind tells them to do." That evening, as they sat near the fire, the rancher reflected on the day. Teaching her had been harder than he expected. It was not just the physical effort, it was teaching patience, attention, and understanding. But it had also been rewarding in ways he had not anticipated. He realized that he was not just showing her how to use tools or manage cattle. He was helping her understand the rhythm of life on the ranch, the connection between work and respect, between effort and care. The woman looked at her hands again, small but marked with the signs of the day's work. There were tiny cuts, faint bruises, and dust under her nails, but she held them carefully, almost proudly. Each mark was a lesson learned, a skill acquired, a step toward mastery. She had begun to understand the strength that came not from raw force, but from skill, patience, and observation. During the night, the wind whispered through the trees and across the fields. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the ranch house. The rancher sat quietly, thinking about how unusual and rare it was to teach someone so eager, so patient, and so observant. The woman slept nearby, resting from the day's labor, her dreams perhaps filled with the lessons she had learned and the challenges she would face tomorrow. As the stars appeared, bright and steady, the rancher felt a sense of anticipation. This was only the beginning. Tomorrow would bring more lessons, more work, and more challenges. But he was confident that she was capable. He had already seen her determination, her ability to observe, and her willingness to try again when she failed. These qualities would serve her well, not just on the ranch, but in life. The first full day of teaching had shown him something important. Learning to use one's hands was not only about skill, it was about attention, patience, and respect. The woman had shown that she possessed these qualities. She had asked for guidance, and she had listened. She had worked hard, learned quickly, and begun to understand the land, the animals, and the tools in a new way. By the time the ranch fell silent under the night sky, both of them had changed in small but meaningful ways. The rancher had learned patience and reflection, seeing how skill could grow from care and attention. The woman had learned the first steps of handling tools, understanding the land, and reading the animals. And both of them had begun a quiet, growing respect for one another. Tomorrow, the work would continue. The rancher would teach, the woman would learn, and together they would face the challenges of the land. But tonight, under the stars and the whispering wind, they rested. And in that quiet moment, the promise of skill, trust, and understanding stretched out before them, as wide and endless as the fields and mountains surrounding the ranch. The next morning, the ranch was alive with activity. The sun rose slowly over the hills, turning the sky golden, and the land seemed to hum with quiet energy. The rancher and the woman were already outside, ready to continue their work. After 2 days together, a rhythm had begun to form. She moved with more confidence now, her hands steadier, her steps sure. But the rancher knew that true skill was not learned in calm mornings. It would be tested by challenge, by sudden difficulty, and by the unexpected. He decided it was time for her to try bigger tasks. "Today," he said, "you will help me with the repairs to the north fence. That one has been weak for months. The cattle could get out if we do not fix it." He handed her a hammer and a bag of nails. She took them carefully, her eyes bright with focus. As they walked to the fence, the rancher noticed her watching the land around them, her gaze attentive to the hills, the trees, and the movement of the cattle. "You notice everything," he said. "That is good. A rancher must see what is not obvious. That is how you prevent problems before they start." She nodded, taking in every word, every movement. Her mind seemed to absorb the land as if she were learning its rhythm as well as its tools. When they reached the fence, he showed her where the posts were broken and which planks needed replacing. The work was harder than she expected. The posts were heavy, the nails stiff, and the sun beat down relentlessly. Her hands ached, her arms tired from lifting and hammering. She wiped sweat from her brow, but she did not complain. Instead, she adjusted her movements, resting briefly when she needed, then continuing with careful effort. The rancher watched her closely. She was learning quickly, but skill required more than learning, it required thinking ahead. "See the fence as a whole," he said. "Think about how each piece supports the next. If one is weak, it affects everything. You must understand how it works before you act." She studied the structure, examining the angles of the planks and the strength of the posts. Slowly she began to make decisions on her own, choosing which pieces to replace first, where to hammer the nails more firmly, and how to brace a post so it would last. By late morning, they had repaired a section of the fence, and she had done most of the work herself. The rancher nodded approvingly. "You are learning fast. Most people would still be struggling with the basics." She smiled faintly but did not speak. Her concentration was still on the fence, on the nails, on the wood. She was learning patience, attention, and careful action. As they worked, a challenge suddenly appeared. A young calf had wandered too close to a weak part of the old fence. It was small but strong, pushing against the wood with all its weight. The woman noticed it immediately. Without hesitation, she ran to guide it back, using the skills she had learned in handling the animals. She spoke softly to calm it, moving with a quiet confidence. The rancher stepped back, silently observing, impressed at how she handled the unexpected. She did not panic. She used her hands, her mind, and her voice to solve the problem. After the calf was safe, they returned to the fence. She seemed energized by the challenge, not discouraged. "The animals test you," the rancher said. "They teach you patience, observation, and respect. Today you passed a small test without even thinking about it. That is real learning." She looked at him, eyes bright, understanding not just the words but the meaning behind them. It was not just about fixing fences. It was about seeing, thinking, and acting with care. By midday, the sun was scorching. They paused under a tree for lunch. Bread, dried meat, and water were shared quietly. She ate quickly, then turned her attention to watching the other cattle. "They are restless," she said. "I think the wind is changing. Maybe a storm will come tonight." The rancher's eyes widened slightly. She was observing patterns he had not yet noticed, using her senses as much as her hands. It was remarkable how quickly she was learning to read the land. After lunch, he decided it was time to introduce her to another skill, working with horses. "You must understand animals as well as the land," he said. "A horse can carry you, but it can also be stubborn or scared. You must learn patience and understanding." She followed him to the stable, where a young horse waited. He showed her how to approach it gently, how to stroke its neck, how to hold the reins without pulling too hard. Her hands trembled slightly at first, unsure, but she listened carefully and copied his movements. The horse tested her, shifting its weight, snorting and stepping sideways. She adjusted, moving with calm authority, speaking softly to reassure it. Slowly, the horse relaxed, allowing her to guide it a short distance. The rancher watched silently, proud of her progress. She had learned not just from instruction, but from observation, intuition, and a willingness to try again when she made mistakes. As the afternoon wore on, they returned to the fence and the fields. Another challenge appeared. A sudden gust of wind threatened to knock down a section of freshly repaired fence. The woman acted quickly, using a spare post to brace it, hammering it into place before the wind could cause damage. The rancher nodded silently. She was thinking ahead, anticipating problems and acting to prevent them. That was skill. That was understanding. By the end of the day, both of them were tired. Their hands were scratched and blistered, their clothes dusty and damp with sweat. But there was a quiet satisfaction in their movements, a sense of accomplishment that came from hard work well done. The rancher looked at the woman, seeing her not just as a learner, but as someone who had grown in skill, confidence, and understanding in a very short time. As they walked back to the ranch house, she spoke quietly. "I understand more now," she said. "Not just how to do things, but why. The land, the animals, the tools, they all have a purpose, and the work is not just about strength. It is about attention, care, and understanding." The rancher smiled slightly. He had been trying to teach her all these things, but hearing her say it in her own words showed that she truly understood. That night, they sat by the fire after supper. The woman looked at her hands, small but marked with scratches and evidence of hard work. "These hands," she said softly, "they feel different now. They can do things I could not do before, and I feel proud." The rancher nodded. "Your hands will learn more tomorrow and the day after that. But today, you have learned something important. Skill is not just what you can do, it is what you understand and how you use it." As the stars appeared over the desert, bright and steady, the rancher thought about how much she had grown in just a few days. She had faced challenges, learned quickly, and shown courage and patience. But he knew that the real tests were yet to come. Life on the ranch was not easy. There would be storms, animals in danger, and moments when strength alone was not enough. She would have to use not just her hands, but her mind, her judgment, and her heart. The woman lay down under a blanket near the fire, thinking about the lessons of the day. She could feel her hands becoming stronger, more confident. She had learned to hold the hammer, to guide the animals, and to anticipate the needs of the land. But she had also learned something deeper, that using one's hands was connected to thinking, observing, and caring. Work was not just about completing a task. It was about understanding the purpose behind it and respecting the life and effort it required. During the night, the wind whispered through the trees and across the fields. The rancher watched the stars, thinking about the woman and the unusual journey they had begun. She had asked for something simple but meaningful: knowledge, skill, and understanding. And in seeking that, she had shown him that learning was a two-way path. He was teaching her, yes, but he was also learning from her determination, her patience, and her quiet strength. By the time the ranch fell silent under the desert sky, both of them had changed in small but meaningful ways. The woman had grown in skill, confidence, and understanding. The rancher had grown in patience, reflection, and respect for someone who was willing to learn in such a focused, honest way. And the land around them, vast and quiet, had begun to witness the growth of a partnership built on trust, effort, and shared understanding. Tomorrow, new challenges would come. She would face harder tasks, bigger responsibilities, and perhaps dangers that could test her newly acquired skills. But she was ready. She had learned to observe, to think ahead, to act with care, and to keep trying even when mistakes were made. And the rancher, quietly proud, knew that she was becoming someone who could face whatever the land demanded. And so, under the stars and the gentle whisper of the desert wind, the first true lessons of challenge and growth were complete. The woman's hands, now stronger and more skilled, had begun a journey that would test them, teach them, and shape them. And the rancher, watching her quietly, knew that the bond between them was growing, built not on words alone, but on effort, understanding, and the work of hands learning together. The next morning arrived quietly, with soft light spilling over the ranch. The woman awoke early, as she always did, stretching her arms and looking at her hands. They were no longer just small, untested hands. They bore the marks of work, of learning, and of growth. Each line, each tiny scar, told a story of effort, patience, and determination. She touched them lightly, feeling the strength they had gained. Today, she thought, she wanted to learn more. Not just about tools, fences, and animals, but about the life of the ranch itself, the land, and perhaps even the man who had become her teacher. The rancher, already awake, was preparing for the day. He noticed her looking at her hands and smiled quietly. She had learned quickly, but he also knew she was ready to begin learning the deeper lessons, lessons that went beyond work and skill. "Good morning," he said. "Today, we will continue with what you already know, but also with something new. We will learn how the land and life here connect, and maybe even how your own knowledge can help this place." She nodded, eager to begin. They started the day with the morning chores, tending the cattle, checking the fences, and repairing the areas that had begun to weaken under the sun. She moved with ease, handling the hammer, rope, and animals as if she had been born to the work. But the rancher wanted her to see that there was more than just physical skill in ranch life. He began to teach her observation in a new way. "Watch the wind," he said. "Notice how the clouds form, how the grass moves, how the animals react. Nature tells you things if you pay attention." She watched closely, noting subtle changes in the sky and the movement of the cattle. For the first time, she began to understand how the land communicated with those who cared to listen. As the morning passed, he led her to the barn where tools, supplies, and other equipment were kept. Here, he showed her more advanced skills, sharpening tools, repairing worn leather, and organizing supplies for efficiency. Her hands worked confidently, but she also asked questions, curious about every small detail. "Why is this leather treated this way?" she asked, holding a piece of worn strap. The rancher explained with patience, detailing how small care could make tools and materials last for years. She nodded, understanding that respect and attention to every small thing were as important as strength and skill. After the morning work, he decided it was time for a lesson he had not yet shared, a lesson of culture, knowledge, and creativity. He had heard her speak softly about her own people, the Apache, in the evenings, but had never pressed for details. "You know," he said carefully, "you have a way of seeing things that is different from mine. Maybe you can show me some of it today." She looked at him, surprised but pleased, and nodded slowly. It was the first time he had asked her to teach him something. She realized that learning went both ways. Knowledge, she understood, was not just about listening. It was about sharing. She began with small crafts, showing him how her people made tools and objects with natural materials. She took small twigs and pieces of soft wood, weaving them into shapes, and explaining how her hands could follow patterns passed down from her elders. The rancher watched, fascinated. Her fingers moved deftly, confident and precise, shaping materials in ways he had never seen. "Your hands can do more than mine," he admitted quietly. "I can teach strength, skill, and endurance, but you have creativity and patience that I did not know existed." She smiled, pleased that he recognized her skills. As they worked together, a quiet bond grew stronger. She taught him how to braid rope in new ways, how to twist wire for sturdier fences, and even small methods of creating simple household items. In turn, he showed her how to adapt her skills to the ranch. Weaving could be used to repair a broken fence. Braiding techniques could help make stronger leads for animals, and crafting small containers could store tools or feed efficiently. The exchange was seamless, a dance of giving and receiving, learning and teaching. Both of them realized that work and culture, strength and creativity, could combine to make something more valuable than either alone. In the afternoon, they faced a new challenge. A sudden gust of wind had threatened to topple a section of the barn roof, loosening some of the wooden panels. The rancher moved quickly to assess the damage, but the woman was already beside him, observing the wood and nails carefully. "We can brace it here," she said, pointing to the weak spot. Then we can secure it before it falls. Together, they worked quickly, lifting panels, hammering nails, and securing loose beams. Her hands moved with confidence, her understanding of materials and effort evident in every motion. The rancher watched silently, amazed at how she could combine her traditional skills with the practical needs of the ranch. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they paused to catch their breath. The wind had calmed, and the land was bathed in golden light. She looked at the rancher and asked quietly, "Why did you teach me to use my hands? Why not just show me the land and the animals?" He thought for a moment. "Because hands are more than tools. They carry your effort, your attention, and your care. They can build, repair, and create. But they also show who you are, what you respect, what you understand, what you can accomplish. Teaching you to use your hands was teaching you to see, think, and act in the world. It is more than labor, it is life itself." She nodded, understanding more deeply than words could express. The evening brought calm after the busy day. They sat near the fire, tired but satisfied. She looked at her hands, now stronger and more confident, yet still delicate in the ways that made her skill unique. "I understand more now," she said softly. "Not just how to do things, but why. My hands can do what I think, what I plan, and what I respect. They carry more than work, they carry meaning." The rancher nodded quietly. "Yes, that is why they are important, and you are learning quickly. Soon you will not just follow instructions, you will lead, decide, and create. Your hands, your mind, and your heart will work together. That is true skill." During the night the ranch was quiet. The stars shone brightly over the hills and fields. The woman lay under a blanket thinking about the day. She had faced challenges, learned new skills, and shared her own knowledge. She realized that learning was not just about imitation. It was about understanding, adapting, and sharing. She had come for skill, but she was gaining confidence, wisdom, and the quiet satisfaction of doing meaningful work. The rancher watched her quietly, seeing the growth he had helped nurture. She was no longer just a visitor or a student. She was becoming part of the ranch, part of the rhythm of the land and animals, part of a process that combined strength, skill, patience, and creativity. He realized that teaching her had changed him as well. He had learned to see work, effort, and knowledge through another person's eyes. He had learned patience, humility, and respect in ways he had not expected. The next day, they continued this pattern. Mornings were for physical work, fences, animals, and land care. Afternoons were for learning and sharing, crafts, observations, and small lessons of culture and creativity. The rancher found himself inspired by her insights, realizing that practical knowledge could be enriched by imagination and tradition. She found herself more confident, understanding not just the techniques but the reasons behind every action, the rhythm and flow of work on the ranch, and the deeper meaning in every effort. Together, they began to see the land not just as a place of labor but as a space for growth, learning, and connection. She adapted her traditional skills to the needs of the ranch, creating solutions that neither she nor he would have thought of alone. He adapted his teaching, learning to listen, observe, and accept new methods. Their partnership became stronger, built on mutual respect, curiosity, and the quiet joy of learning together. By the end of Part 4, it was clear that the woman was no longer a beginner. She had grown in skill, confidence, and understanding. She had learned not just how to use her hands, but how to observe, adapt, and think creatively. And the rancher had learned that teaching was not just about giving knowledge, it was about receiving it as well. Together they had begun to create something rare, a connection built on effort, respect, and shared growth. The night settled over the ranch, quiet and peaceful. The fire burned low, casting warm light on their tired but content faces. She looked at her hands, now strong and capable, yet gentle and careful. "They are mine now," she said softly, "and I will use them wisely." The rancher nodded, understanding the depth of her words. She had asked for guidance, but in return she had given something equally valuable: insight, creativity, and a partnership built on trust and respect. And under the stars, the ranch and the land seemed to witness the growth of two people learning together, hands and minds connected, ready for the challenges that tomorrow would bring. The morning arrived quietly, with a soft glow stretching across the ranch. The sun rose slowly over the distant hills, casting golden light over the land. It was a calm day, but one that promised hard work. The woman was awake early, as always, looking at her hands. They were no longer small or untested, they bore the marks of her journey. Cuts, blisters, and calluses spoke of long days of work, of lessons learned, and of effort that had shaped not just her hands but herself. She flexed them, feeling the strength and skill she now possessed. Today, she realized, she could do much more than she had imagined just a few days ago. The rancher was already preparing the tools for the day. He noticed her looking at her hands and smiled quietly. He had watched her grow from a newcomer, cautious and unsure, to someone capable and confident. She had asked only to learn to use her hands, but she had gained much more: patience, observation, understanding, and the courage to face challenges. "Good morning," he said. "Today, we will finish the repairs in the north field and start preparing for the cattle drive tomorrow. You are ready for it?" She nodded, feeling a quiet pride and a deep sense of readiness. The day began with the final repairs on the north fence. She worked alongside the rancher, lifting heavy posts, hammering nails, and securing weak planks. Her hands moved with confidence, precise and strong. She anticipated the next step before he could even tell her, adjusting the placement of boards, bracing posts, and checking the fence line. The rancher watched in quiet amazement. "You have truly learned," he said. "Your hands, your eyes, and your mind are all working together." "That is what makes a person capable," she smiled, feeling the satisfaction of hard work and understanding. After the fence was repaired, he decided it was time for her to take the lead. "You have learned how to follow instructions," he said. "Now I want you to make decisions. Lead a task and I will follow you." She looked at him, a mix of surprise and determination in her eyes. It was a new responsibility, a test of what she had truly learned. She walked to the barn, assessing what needed attention, and began directing the tasks. She instructed which tools to use, how to lift heavy items safely, and how to move the animals without startling them. Her voice was calm, confident, and firm, yet gentle, guiding without demanding. The rancher stepped back and let her lead, feeling a quiet pride in what she had become. In the afternoon, they faced a challenge that tested both her skill and her judgment. A section of the field fence had been weakened by the wind overnight. A few cattle had wandered close to it, risking escape. Without hesitation, she assessed the situation. She used the skills she had learned, guiding the animals back carefully, securing the fence with extra supports, and ensuring it would hold until they could make permanent repairs. Every action was thoughtful, deliberate, and effective. The rancher watched silently, recognizing that she had grown from a student into a capable partner. She did not panic or rush. She acted with understanding, experience, and care. After the challenge was resolved, they took a moment to rest under a large tree near the cattle pen. She looked at him quietly. "I understand now," she said softly. "It is not just about strength or skill. It is about seeing, thinking, and caring. My hands can do more, but only if my mind guides them and only if I understand what I am doing." The rancher nodded. "Yes. That is why I asked you to learn with your hands, not just your eyes. True skill comes from understanding, not just action, and you have learned well." The rest of the afternoon was spent preparing for the next day's cattle drive. She helped organize supplies, pack tools, and check the animals. She moved confidently, taking initiative where needed and offering thoughtful suggestions. The rancher listened carefully, impressed with her judgment and foresight. The partnership between them had grown strong. She had learned from him, but he had also learned from her. the quiet creativity, the careful observation, and the ability to see solutions he might not have considered. Their work had become a shared effort, a collaboration of skill, knowledge, and trust. As the sun began to lower, painting the ranch in golden light, the woman paused to look at the fields, the fences, and the animals. She reflected on how far she had come. When she first arrived, she had been unsure, cautious, and entirely dependent on guidance. Now she moved with confidence, her hands capable and skilled, her mind attentive and clear, her heart steady. She realized that learning was more than following instructions. It was about observing, thinking, adapting, and growing. Her hands were no longer just tools. They were instruments of understanding, strength, and care. The rancher observed her quietly, realizing that he had witnessed something rare. He had begun teaching her to use her hands, expecting to pass on practical skills. But in doing so, he had seen her grow in wisdom, patience, courage, and judgment. Teaching her had changed him too. He had learned to see work, effort, and learning through another person's perspective. He had discovered patience, humility, and the joy of shared growth. Their bond had become something deeper than teacher and student. It had become partnership, built on respect, trust, and mutual understanding. That evening, they sat by the fire after supper, tired but satisfied. The woman looked at her hands, now strong, capable, and confident. "These hands," she said softly, "can do more than I imagined. They can build, repair, guide, and protect. But they also remind me of what I have learned: care, patience, observation, and respect. I am ready for what comes next." The rancher nodded, understanding the depth of her words. "You have earned it," he said. "You are capable not just in action but in judgment. You are ready for life here and for anything the land asks of you." The night was calm, with stars shining brightly over the desert. The ranch was quiet, the animals resting peacefully. She lay near the fire, reflecting on her journey. She had arrived seeking skill, but she had gained understanding, confidence, and a sense of belonging. She realized that hands alone were not enough. It was the combination of mind, heart, and hands that created true capability. And she had learned to balance them all, guided by patient teaching and her own determination. The next morning, the rancher and the woman rose early to begin the cattle drive. She moved with quiet confidence, directing the animals, guiding the herd, and anticipating challenges along the way. Her hands worked smoothly, her mind attentive, her decisions steady. The rancher followed her lead, trusting her judgment completely. Together, they guided the herd across the land, navigating uneven terrain, careful streams, and narrow passes. Her hands, trained by work and guided by understanding, moved efficiently and skillfully, accomplishing tasks that had seemed impossible just days before. As the herd settled safely in the next pasture, the woman paused to look at her hands again. They were marked with scratches, small bruises, and calluses, but they were strong, capable, and confident. She realized that the journey had shaped more than her hands. They had shaped her understanding, her judgment, and her connection to the land. She had learned to act, to observe, to adapt, and to create solutions. She had become someone who could face challenges with calm confidence and thoughtful skill. The rancher watched her quietly, feeling a deep sense of pride. She had started as a learner, asking only to be taught how to use her hands. But she had grown into a partner, capable of leading, deciding, and adapting. She had learned more than skill. She had learned patience, observation, respect, and creativity. And in teaching her, he had also learned lessons he had not expected: humility, appreciation, and the value of shared effort. Together, they had created something rare, a connection built on respect, trust, and mutual growth. As the sun began to set over the hills, painting the land in shades of gold and orange, they returned to the ranch. She carried tools confidently, handled the animals with care, and moved with the rhythm of the land. She no longer saw herself as a visitor or a learner. She was part of the ranch, part of the land, and part of the life they shared. Her hands, once small and inexperienced, were now instruments of skill, understanding, and creation. That evening, they sat quietly near the fire. She looked at her hands, then at the rancher, and spoke softly. "I came here to learn how to use my hands," she said. "But I have learned more than that. I have learned to see, to understand, and to act. I have learned patience, respect, and care. And I have learned that learning is never one way. You teach, but you also learn from those you teach." "Thank you." The rancher nodded, quietly moved. "You have taught me as much as I have taught you. Your hands have learned, but so has your mind, and mine as well. And together we have built more than fences, more than skills. We have built trust, respect, and understanding. That is the real work." The stars appeared over the desert, bright and steady. The ranch was quiet, the animals resting, and the land calm. Together they had completed a journey that began with a simple request: to learn to use her hands. And that journey had grown into something greater, a journey of growth, trust, skill, and understanding. Hands that had once been small and uncertain were now capable, guided by knowledge, patience, and heart. And the bond they had formed would remain, quiet and strong like the land itself. The woman smiled quietly, thinking about the journey. She had learned to build, to repair, to guide, and to create. But she had also learned to understand, to observe, and to respect. She had come seeking skill, and she had found wisdom. And as she rested under the stars, she felt ready for whatever challenges the land or life might bring, confident in her hands, her mind, and her heart. And the rancher, watching her quietly, knew that he had witnessed something rare: the transformation of a determined learner into a capable, confident, and thoughtful partner. Hands that had once been uncertain were now steady. Minds that had once been inexperienced were now sharp and thoughtful. And together, they had created a life of skill, respect, and understanding that would continue long after this day, rooted in the work of their hands and the strength of their bond.